Next.js, the most popular JavaScript framework for writing full-stack web applications. Whether you are just starting with React or you are already familiar with it, Next.js is the next step in your web development journey. It's a full-stack framework that helps you build fast, scalable, SEO-friendly web apps with powerful built-in features like routing, server components, server actions, caching, image optimization, API routes, and more. That's why even the official React documentation recommends Next.js for building your React applications. If you want to land a job or grow your freelance career, Next.js is very high in demand in 2025. You'll find hundreds of jobs being posted daily on platforms like Upwork and Indeed. In this course, you'll learn how to build and deploy full-featured blog platform like Dev or Medium with Next.js 15 using modern tools and best practices. This isn't just another tutorial. It's a step-by-step journey that will help you master Next.js and create production-ready applications that you can launch, showcase, and can help you get hired. You will learn how to use Next.js file routing system. We will set up a complete authentication system with the Next.auth version 5, now called Auth.js. We will work with client and server components, build reusable UI components, use server actions, upload images using Edge Store, send emails with Resend, build a rich text editor with Blocknote editor, add advanced blog filters and search functionality, build a threaded blog comment section, add claps and bookmarks to blogs, create and edit user profiles, follow and unfollow other users, set up a real-time notification system with Socket.io, implement role-based admin and user features, and much more. My name is Charles, and I will be your instructor in this course. I have over 5 years of experience working with React, and I have taught thousands of students how to create web applications in React and Next.js through my YouTube channel. In this course, I will be sharing my React and Next.js knowledge that I have gathered over the years. Now, let's get started by going through the demo of the application that we will be working on this entire course. I would like you to know that this 3 hours video is part of my full stack Next.js 15 course where we create the multi-user blogging platform. The entire course is 18 hours long. It took me a lot of time to prepare and create, and that is why it's also a premium course. It's well structured and you will get to learn a lot of stuff in this particular course. If you wish to create the multi-user blogging platform with a lot of features including user profile, editor, follow and unfollow features, live notifications, and so on, please check out my course and I'll leave a link at the description section below. Go grab it while it's still at an offer. Also, this is my first course on Udemy, so your support will highly be appreciated. In this video, I will give you the demo of the application that we will be working on this entire course. It is a full stack application and it will have a lot of features. We will use React and Next.js version 15, and this is a blogging platform where users can create blogs and other users can explore and read their blogs. It is something similar to Medium or Dev.to. We have both the light and the dark mode. We will be working on real-time notification by making use of Socket.io. We have a user profile here. When we click, it gives us a drop-down menu to go to the profile, to create a post. We can go to bookmarks, and if we are admin, we'll have this admin. So we'll work on role-based users where you have normal users and admins. And also we'll be working on an authentication system. So you can see we have sign out here. We'll explode it later on. And then we have some tags here at the top. We can use these tags to filter our blogs. And then right here, we have the list of the blogs. And if I scroll at the very bottom, you'll notice that we have next. This next simply takes us to the next page, meaning that we have pagination for this particular list. And if you check at the URL, we have one here, meaning that we are on the first page. If I click on next, that will update our URL to 2. This is the second page. We will be using Next.js for this, meaning that our content will be rendered on the server, and rendering the content on the server is so important. It's SEO friendly and our pages loads fast. If I click Next.js right here, you'll notice that this will filter down our content to only have posts that have Next.js tag in them. And if you check at the URL, you'll notice that we have tag as Next.js. We can combine filters with the search. So if I come right here and I say e-commerce, you'll notice that that will filter down to the content that have a title with e-commerce and also tag as Next.js. And if you check at the URL again, it updated tag as Next.js and title as e-com. If we want to clear the filters, click on this here, and that will remove the tag, and also it will remove the search. So all will give us all the posts. So how do we get to create a post? If I come right here, I can click on create post, and this will get us to our blog editor. This is a very strong editor, as you'll see soon. First of all, we can be able to add a cover image. I can select this one, open, and that will upload the image. Once it's uploaded, it will show up right here. And the cool thing is that once I hover, we can remove this image or even change it. So let's try to change, and it will bring us back here, and I can select again and open. So after some time, it's uploaded. We can have a blog title. We can select the tags. Remember, these tags will be helpful in filtering. So mine is React and Node.js, Express, and MongoDB. So I can select the three. I don't have MongoDB right here. And then we will have a rich text editor, which uses blocks. This is something similar to Notion. If I use a /, you'll notice that we get the different options here. We have heading, number list, bullet. We can add code blocks. We can add paragraphs. We can even add images and emojis, which is cool. So in this case, let's add a heading 3. Just type something. So the next one, if I say /, I can select the different option from here, and I go with a numbered list. I can say 1, 2, 3. Another cool feature, if I get to highlight, you'll see we have options to format the text. We can underline, we can change the color to red, we can strike through, we can make it italic, we can make it bold, we can try to add a block of code here. So let's click on code block, and look, from here we can select JavaScript, we can select HTML, we can select CSS. So let's try to write some HTML code. Look, it's formatted nicely. We can say it's HTML, which is cool. Once you are done with that, you can go ahead and publish your blog, or you can save it as a draft. Once you save it as a draft, it will not show up on the main feed, but it will be available on your profile in case you want to edit it. So let's save it as a draft. I can go back to the main feed here, and from the main feed we will not see it even if I happen to refresh. But if I go to the profile, we will see it. So let's go to the profile, and look, we have it right here. Deploy man, it's draft, and we can be able to edit. And look, from the profile, we'll also be adding pagination, and you can see it from the URL. We have one at the end here. I can click on edit, and we get to edit this post. We can come ahead, either delete the post, or we can get to publish it. Once we publish the post and we go back to the profile, you'll see it is no longer marked as draft. And if we go back to the homepage here, you'll notice that it is added at our main feed. Another feature that we will work on is if we click on the title here, we get to this post, and you'll notice that we can add reactions to the post. We can crop, we can mark it as a bookmark to read it later, or if we didn't want to lose it. And if I scroll at the bottom here, you'll notice that we'll have a comment section. Let's just say hello, and we submit. Once we submit, that comment will show at the bottom here. And you can see for a single comment, we can crop. We can add a reply to it, and we say, hey, I submit, and that, okay, we have a strong validation going on our form, which is cool. So let's just make sure that it's a longer comment. And if I click on here replies, we get the reply here, hey, and we get to mention the person that we are replying to. We'll also be sending notification to the person that we replied to. Now right here, we are the owner of the blog. So that means that we are not sending notification to ourselves, okay? So what we could do is to log in as a different user and we see notifications happen in real time. So now here I am logged in as a different user and here we are still on the previous user. So these are two browsers. Now I'll click on this particular blog and I can leave a comment and I go ahead and submit that. That will be added at our comments. And look, immediately this user, because they are the creator of this blog post, they get a notification about a new comment. It happened in real time. That means that you will learn about Socket.io in this course. And if I click on this, you'll see Just Charles commented on your blog post, deploy man. And if I click on this, that will open that post and it will take us to the comment section and we'll get to see Just Charles a few seconds ago added a new comment. I can reply to this one and I can say thank you. And I go ahead and submit that. And once I submit, Just Charles immediately gets a notification. Ciao Charles replied to your comment on nice post. Very nice. If I click on that, that will open this post and take us to the comment section where I had added that comment. And I can read the replies now and I can see Charles replied a few seconds ago to me and said thank you. We'll only have one level of reply, but at least we are mentioning the user whom we are replying to. So this is something similar to the YouTube's comment section. If you are the creator of the comment, you can be able to delete that comment. And once you delete the comment, it will delete together with its replies. So you learn how to do that. Another feature that we had mentioned is the bookmark. So if I go to the bookmarks here, I can be able to see the posts that I have bookmarked. Another feature now that we can explore is the authentication feature. We will be working on a strong authentication system. So let's sign out. And once I sign out, you can see from the look, we have a form for logging in with the email and password. And we also have social logins, GitHub or Google. We'll make use of Next.auth version 5, which currently is the latest version of Next.auth. When working on the form, you'll learn how to create reusable components and also how you can perform form validation using React Hook Form and Zod. So right now, if I just try to log in, you'll notice that we have a strong validation going on. Let's go to register here and we will create a user. Email should be a valid email because we will be validating this email by sending a verification link to it. So I will use a valid email, strong password, and you confirm the password, register. Once I register, it takes some time and you will see verification email sent. Now we will get an email like this one and we need to click here to verify the email. So I'll go ahead and click that. And this will load our web page. And amazingly, you'll notice here we have a token that will be used to verify the email. And now you can see email verified. And I can go and log in here. Once we go to the login page, you'll notice that we also have forget password, meaning that we can also send a link to reset the password. So let's try this one. I will send the email. And again, I'll get an email like this. Click here to reset your password. If I click on this now will open for me a page where I can reset the password. So we'll have password and we confirm password and we save the new password. And by using this token, it will know the user whom we are resetting password for. So not everyone who can reset password. You can come to this page, but the token, if it's wrong, you'll not be able to reset the password. Very nice. So let's just go ahead and log in back to our system using now the verified email. We already verified by clicking the link. I'll go ahead and log in with email and password. And now we are logged in as a different user, and we can go to the profile. From the profile, we can see the email here. We can see the ID. We can see that we have 0 followers, 0 users, and no posts. We can be able to edit a profile, guys. And from here, you can see we can add a bio. We can select the different tags that I am interested in. Then we save changes. Now, if I come back to the profile here, you'll notice that our bio was updated and we have the tags here. And if I click on React, that will add that filter on our URL and show us posts that are related to React. I can go back to the profile again, and if I click on edit, if we logged in with email and password, we will also be able to update the email. And if you use a new email, we'll also need to verify that. So we'll send a verification email to it. And we also have a danger zone where we get to delete our account. Deleting the account will delete everything related to the account, including posts, claps, bookmarks, and so on. Another cool thing that we will do on our application is that we will be able to follow users and unfollow them. Let's try to follow this user here. So I can click on Charles and we follow the user. So I'll click follow. And once we follow this user, they'll automatically get a notification that we followed them. Peter followed you. If I click on this will take us to the profile for the person who followed us. And we can see their profile and we can happen to follow them back. Once we follow them back, you can see Peter also gets a real-time notification and they'll see Chaoo Charles followed you. Another cool feature is that you can happen to explore other users' followers. So we can see this user follows Charles, Peter, and Charles K. We can explore these users' profiles. Let's go to just Charles. And we see this is their profile. Very nice. We can see also the people that they are following. So we'll be creating these pop-ups and so on. So this is very, very cool. We will also work on role-based users where we have normal users and admins. And for admins, it will just be a simple example so that you know and understand how to add admins to the system. And if I come right here, you'll see that we have an admin dashboard where we can show a few stats about the system. Another thing that we will do is allow admins to delete any posts in our system. We can go to this post. We are not the one who created this post, but we will be able to edit this post right here. And once we scroll at the bottom, we can be able to delete a post that we have not created because we are admin users. But I think we could block publishing the post or saving changes to this post so that admins don't manipulate the content, and all they can do is to either delete or block that content. And yeah, it will just be a simple example to show you how to add admins to the system in case you want to implement that feature. So this is a big full stack application that we'll be working on this entire course. We will start slow, so if you're not good in React or Next.js, you'll easily be able to follow along. In the next video, let's see the prerequisites that you need before you take this course. There are a few things that I'll be expecting that you already know before taking this course. And the first thing is HTML and CSS. This is basically the foundation of web development. So I'll be assuming that you have created at least one website with HTML and CSS. Another thing that I'll be assuming that you already know is the JavaScript basics. So you know about the different data types in JavaScript. You know about variables in JavaScript. That means that you know the difference between let, var, and const. You know about objects, arrow functions, arrays and array methods, and loops. I'll also be assuming that you know about the modern JavaScript, that is ES6 features, things like destructuring, spread operator, template literals, and modules. I'll also be assuming that you know about React basics. You know about components in React, JSX, state, props, and hooks. So this course is mainly about Next.js And you don't need to know anything about Next.js while taking this course, because I'll teach you everything from scratch and we'll move on to building the full stack application. So if you don't know any of this stuff, I recommend that you take some crash courses on them before taking this course. So in the next video, we will check the difference between React and Next.js and why we will be using Next.js to build up our application. In this video, we will go through some of the key differences between React and Next.js, and we will be seeing why we are choosing to use Next.js over just React. To begin with, React is good for front-end development only, and if you need to work on the backend, you will need a separate setup. For example, Node.js, or might need to use a different programming language like Python or Go and so on. But when it comes to Next.js, it supports full stack development where we have built-in API routes and server actions. Although we have React server components in React, you will need extra setup for server-side rendering. But with Next.js, we have the inbuilt support for server-side rendering, and we can use the React server components easily in Next.js. Server-side rendering is so important because it's good for SEO and performance. So the application will be more fast, and also it will rank higher on Google because the content will be rendered from the server. And the other point is that if we want to optimize stuff in React, things like images or fonts, we will need to perform some manual optimizations. But with Next.js, it's optimized out of the box with image and font optimizations and even caching. Another reason why we might need to make use of Next.js is because React does not have inbuilt routing, and if you need routing in React, you need to use external libraries like React Router. But with Next.js, we have that inbuilt file-based routing system. So we'll be seeing the folder structure of creating the different routes in Next.js. So in general, React is a JavaScript library that focuses on building reactive and reusable UI components, where Next.js is a full-stack React framework with built-in tools for production-ready apps. And with the Next.js, we will be able to use React components and other features of React. And on top of that, we get these extra features, like we will be able to work on our backend by making use of server actions and API routes. We will be able to render our content from the server. We are able to get these optimizations out of the box, like images, fonts, and caching. And we have many other features of Next.js which makes it suitable for creating our application. For us to create a new Next.js application, we first need to set up our development environment, and you can go to nextjs.org and then click on get started. I'll go to installation, and from here you'll see that we will need some system requirements. The first thing that you will need is to have Node.js installed in your machine. The other thing that you need here is an operating system, macOS, Windows, or Linux. I'll be assuming that you already have that set up in your machine. And then to check if you have Node.js installed in your machine, you need to go to your machine terminal. So I'll go to the search here, and what I'll do, I'll say cmd. This is for Windows, to open the command prompt, which is the terminal for Windows. Once I open it like this, I can say node space -v, hit enter, and that will give me a version of Node that I am using. If you don't see a version here, that means that you don't have Node.js installed in your machine, and you will need to download and install Node.js in your machine. If this version is less than 18.18, you'll also need to download and install Node.js in your machine. So to download Node.js, just visit this link, which will take us to nodejs.org. And from here, you'll be able to download and install Node.js in your machine. Another thing that we will need to create our application is a code editor. And in this entire course, I'll be making use of Visual Studio Code. which is my preferred code editor. And if you want to have the same experience as me, I highly recommend it. But you can still use any other which you are comfortable with. So all you need to do is to download and install Visual Studio Code on your machine. Now let's go ahead and create our new Next.js application. So still on installation, if I scroll down here, you'll see we have this one command which we can run to create our application, and then we'll just answer a few questions. But we also have a manual way of creating our application where we install things step by step. Remember, Next.js is a framework that is built on top of React. So during manual installation, you'll also install React and React DOM. But I don't want to stress you with this long process. So just come right here, copy this command like that. And then here, I am already on a folder which I created. And what I'll do, on Windows, I can click on this path. And then I'll type cmd, hit enter, and that will open the terminal on that particular path where we have this folder for our project. And right here, I'll just include this particular command. I'll paste it, the one that we copied, and this will create a Next.js application using the latest version of Next.js. And currently, the latest version is version 15. So in future, we will be having newer versions, and for you to be able to follow this course without issues, I will recommend that you use the version that I am currently using during this course, because there can be breaking changes in future, and I don't want you to face a lot of issues while taking this course. So what I'll do here is that I'll change this command a little bit. I will remove latest and I'll specify the version of Next.js that I am using during this course. And I recommend that you run this command and use version 15.1.4 so that during the course you will not face breaking changes because of the version. So go ahead and hit enter. Here you can give your project a name and it will be now inside this web dev blog. But if I want to make web dev blog to be the name of my project, I'll just use a period or a full stop and hit enter. So that will take the name of that folder as the name of the project. Would you like to use TypeScript? And I'll say yes, I'll be using TypeScript. Do you want to use ESRint? And I'll say yes. Do you want to use TailwindCSS? And I will say yes. Would you like your code inside the SRC directory? And I'll say no, which is the default. Would you like to use the app router recommended? I'll say yes. So this is the latest version of Next.js where we use app router instead of pages. In this case, we will be having an app folder. So I'll go ahead and say yes. Would you like to use Turbo Pack for Next Dev? I can say yes. Would you like to customize the import alias? I'll actually say yes. So this just shortens the import path. You'll see it in action when we are coding our application. So I'll say yes. What import alias would you like to configure? I'll say et, so I'll just hit enter. Just like that, this will start creating our application and it will install the different dependencies. So I'll wait for this to complete the installation and then we will proceed. So now our application have been created. What I'll do is that I'll open now this application with Visual Studio Code. If you are using Visual Studio Code, you will be able to use this command to open the application. Say code space and a period or a full stop and then hit enter, and that will open that particular folder on Visual Studio Code, and here it is. If you are not able to open like that, what you can do is to open Visual Studio Code first, and then I think you can go here, go to file, and you can open folder. If you click open folder, you'll be able to navigate to the location of your folder which have the project and then open it with Visual Studio Code. But I like using this short code here to open that project on Visual Studio Code. I can just go ahead and close the command prompt now. And from here, we will have a terminal here and I can say new terminal. So if we need to install any other dependencies or run our application, I will be making use of this particular terminal here. For now, all I want to check is the package.json file. Here we have some scripts and To start the application, we can use this dev command, and this is how we run that command. We can say npm run dev, and if I hit enter, this will start our Next.js application. And now right here you'll see it is running on localhost 3000. So hit Control and then click on this link, and now that will open our application on your default browser. And just like that, we have been able to create our Next.js application with this default page. What I want us to do in this video is to explore some of the different files, and we will start with this app folder. If I happen to expand the app folder and then click on layout.tsx, you scroll at the bottom here, you'll notice here is where we are creating a component called RootLayout, and this component is basically the start of our application. And right here you can see we have children which we are receiving as props here, and these children is basically the different pages that will be available in our application. Currently, we only have one page, and below our layout.tsx file, you'll see that we have page.tsx file. This page.tsx file is our home page, and we are exporting a component called home, and all this content here is what we are currently seeing on our browser. So we can confirm that by checking the browser. Here we have get started by editing, and you'll see that we have it here, get started by editing. Save and see your changes, save and see your changes. So all this content that we have here is what we are having on the screen, and it is being styled by using TailwindCSS. So we'll be exploring TailwindCSS as we move on. But for now, what we can do is to change everything that we have on this page. I can remove the entire of this div, which is at our return, and right here I can return my own div, and I can say hello world. I will remove the import of this image because we are not using it. Save that file. Once I save, you'll notice that this page will update, and all we will have is hello world. Now at our layout, right here we are exporting an object called metadata. This metadata object have some basic information about this particular page. For example, we have the title of the page, and that shows at the tab there, and we can happen to edit these. Right now it's create next app, but we can say web dev blog. I go ahead and save, and that will update right here to web dev blog. We have the description, and we can also update that. Another thing that we can do is to set up a favicon, an icon that will show at the top there. So what I'll do, I'll come right here and I'll say Lucid icons. I can search. I will say notes, and I'll take this first one. I'll come here and I'll copy the SVG. I can minimize everything there. Then I'll go to public, and basically I'll delete all these files. So I will hit Control, select those files, and then Shift delete to permanently delete them. Inside public, I'll now add a new file, and I can call this one logo.svg. I'll hit enter, and I'll paste what I copied from our Lucid icons. So I'll paste, and we get this SVG. Now I can be able to change the color for this particular SVG. Stroke, instead of current color, I'll say orange. So look for stroke and say orange, and I will go ahead and save that file. If I come to layout here, I can specify a favicon right here. I'll say icons full colon. Right here I'll say icon full colon will be available at stroke logo.svg. Next.js will be wise enough to check that logo at the public folder. So once we say that icons is at this path, Next.js will look for that particular file at the public folder, and it will pick up our logo.svg right here. Now, another thing that we need to do for this to work out is to come to this favicon and delete it. Actually, right now it already updated like this, but I'll still go ahead and delete this favicon like that. And you can see we now have this notes icon, which is orange. Still at the layout, we will explore fonts in the next one. So for now, note that this layout is the beginning of our application. We have the metadata object for title, description, and icons. And then we have this page, which is the home page. Next.js 15 have built-in support for Google Fonts and font optimizations. And in this episode, I want us to see how we can get to add our own fonts in our Next.js application. At the moment, you can already see how we are importing fonts from Google Fonts. We import the font from Next/font/Google. And you can make use of any Google font and import it right here. To check the name of the font that you want, you can just browse fonts.google.com. So these are the names that you can import, and you can also search for fonts. And in this case, I want us to make use of Poppins. So to import Poppins, this is the name of the font that we will specify right here. I'll go ahead and remove these ones, and I will import Poppins from Next/font/Google, and then I will remove one of these. Right here, I'll call Poppins as a function. So I'll just say Poppins, and Poppins expects us to add something else, which is the font weight. So here, I'll go ahead and say weight, and I specify the different font weights that I want. In this case, I'll be using font weight of 400. And then for the bold font, I'll be using font weight of 700. And after doing that, you can see the error is gone. Another thing that we need to do is to specify a variable for our font. And in this case, I'll just say that the variable here is Poppins. Now we need to make use of this Poppins so that it's applied in our website. And we'll do it just at the bottom here at the body. So all we need to do is to remove one of these because we no longer need two, and then right here I'll just say Poppins. So we are reading this as a JavaScript variable like that. So we are saying that the font will be Poppins.variable, and then it will know that we are using this Poppins font, and it will be applied in the entire of our website. Then this particular class name is used in CSS to smoothen the font or make it look better. So don't worry about that. This file looks a bit different because we have some imports which you don't have, because this is later on in the course, and when editing the video for the fonts, I realized something, that right here we didn't change the variable name for our Poppins font. Even though the font works, it's a good thing that we maintain a similar name for our font here. So here it's a good thing if we say font Poppins, and this variable can then be used in CSS, and it will be easier to understand which font you used. Although we won't really be using it because we'll work on TailwindCSS, and also all our application will be in Poppins font, I think it's a good thing to specify that. Now, in the next video, I'll be showing you how you can create a CN function, which would be really helpful when working with TailwindCSS. So I'll see you in the next one. We will be using TailwindCSS to style our application, and in this episode, I want us to create a utility function that will be really helpful when working with TailwindCSS. We call this function CN function. It will help us to combine Tailwind classes and also to conditionally render them. For us to create that function, there are two packages that I want us to install, and the first one is this package, and then you can specify the version like this, and then the other package that we will use is this Tailwind merge, and then you specify the version like this. So we use this CLSX package in conditionally rendering of the Tailwind classes, and then we use Tailwind merge to resolve conflicts or remove redundancy with our class names. And when creating the CN function, we'll basically be combining the functionality of this particular package and this particular package. So go ahead and hit enter and install those two packages. Once it's complete, you can go at the root of the application and add a new folder. We will call this folder lib. Hit enter, and then inside the lib, I'll add a new file and I'll call it utils.ts, and I'll hit enter. We will import both of the packages that we installed. So I'll say import CLSX, and this will be coming from our package CLSX. And another thing that we will bring in from this CLSX package is a type of class value like that. And then right here, I'll go ahead and import TW merge, standing for Tailwind merge. TW merge will basically be coming from Tailwind merge. And then right here, I'll go ahead and create a function, and I'll make sure that I export it from this utils file. So I'll say export function cn. I will invoke that function, and then right here, we will be returning something. This function will be able to receive the different class names. We will bring them as inputs, and we'll give these inputs the type. So the type of inputs will be class value, and it will be an array like that. So just do it like this. Basically, we will receive the different class names right here. And then right here, we will return TW merge. We invoke it. We'll pass CLSX in Tailwind merge, and we'll also invoke this CLSX, and we'll say inputs. And we can now use this cn function to write the class name here, where we are adding these pop-ins, and you'll see how easy it is to use the cn function. First of all, I'll copy this one here, copy, then I will remove the content that is in here, and I will call cn. Make sure to import this cn. You can click here and say control space and click on this option, and it will import it from libutils. And then in here, we can pass now the class name that I copied like that. So you can see there I use quote, and then I pass the class name. Now to combine this class name with that of popins, I can just say here comma, and here I'll say popins.variable. Just like that. Through this cn function, we are able to also conditionally render classes. This is how we could conditionally render. If we have something that is true or gives us true, we can say end, and we do something. For example, we can say bg red and then hyphen 300. So this is with the help of CLSX that our cn function is able to conditionally render this class, and this will be really helpful as we move forward. Now, if it's false, it will not display it. If it's true, it will display it. So we don't need this. This is just to show you that we can do something like that. And for now, we are able to just use cn function for both functionality, combine classes, and also to conditionally render them. As I said before, we will be using TailwindCSS to style our application. And if you don't know anything about TailwindCSS, you don't need to worry. The only thing that I expect is that you are good in CSS, because if you already know CSS very well, then TailwindCSS is so easy to get started with. And TailwindCSS will just be using a bunch of classes, and then the styles will be applied directly. So we don't need to create the various CSS files, okay? We'll be using classes like flex, bg, straight 100 to set background color, rounded to set a border radius, w is width, h is height. So these classes are actually so straightforward, and you can already guess what they are doing. And if you want to know about any class or how to do a certain thing, I highly recommend the TailwindCSS documentation. So you can go to tailwindcss.com, and if you go to docs here, you just search, for example, adding a padding. So you can just say padding like that, and then you click on padding here, and you'll see to add a padding, you just say pt, and then you set the size of the padding that you want. So pt is padding top, padding right, padding bottom, padding left, or you just say P for padding or round. If you wanted to add margin, you just say margin, and then you click on margin there, and you already see how we can add some margin. Margin left, margin top, margin bottom, margin right, or just M for margin or round. MX is margin around the x-axis, MY margin along the y-axis. So this is top and bottom, this is left and right. So this is very, very easy to work with. And the good thing is that when creating our Next.js app, TailwindCSS was already automatically configured in our application, and all you need to do is to start using it. So if you check at your application here, you'll already see we have these files, tailwindconfig.ts, which was created when we were creating our app. We also have this postcss.config file where we set up TailwindCSS as a plugin. We also have at our app, then you go to growboss.css, we have these directives which are so useful for our Tailwind CSS. You can remove this code here and you remain with these Tailwind CSS directives because this is all we need to work with Tailwind CSS. And you don't need to even touch these files at the moment. All we will do for now is to make use of the class names that are available to style our app. Now, once we remove those styles from growboss.css and you save that file, and then you make sure that your app is running. So here npm run dev, hit enter, and you go to localhost 3000. This background color should be removed. Okay, so we have already this black background color. It should be gone, and let's make sure it's running. And we happen to refresh our app here, and there we go. You can see it's removed. And now we can test if our Tailwind CSS is working by making use of those Tailwind classes. So go to layout, and then just right here after this one, space, and you can say bg -red -500. And you can see the way I'm getting these suggestions. For you, for now, I think you will not get them, but I'll show you how you can get them. For now, just write this, bg red and then 500. Make sure there is hyphen between them and save. So this is adding a background color. And if I come here, you can see we have that background color applied. So we can say text, let it be red. And then you can see we have different shades of red depending on the value that we specify, 50, 100, 200. So let's say 100. And that will apply the text color of that particular color, and there we go. So it's not so clear, not unless we use a different one like blue, and then we make it to be more visible like 500, and I save. And if I come here now, you'll see this color is blue. And this is how we easily make use of Tailwind CSS. So to get those suggestions, you'll need to add a plugin. Go to this particular icon. I believe yours should be on the left here. You click on that icon that look like this for extensions. Then you will search right here for Tailwind IntelliSense. So let me look for that particular extension that I have already installed. This one here. You will search for Tailwind CSS IntelliSense. You install. Once you install, it should already work. If it doesn't, I recommend that you close your Visual Studio Code and then open it again. You can now come here and you try the different things. You can try to add padding. If I say p hyphen, you can see that is padding, padding top hyphen. So that is all about Tailwind CSS and how we will be using it. So I'll remove all those styles and I'll save. And now in the next video, we can start working on our Navbar. And we will be styling our Navbar by making use of Tailwind CSS. In this section, I want us to work on our Navbar. Our Navbar will look like this. We have a logo here, search at the center, then some icons and a user menu with some drop-down options like this. And to begin with, we'll just open our layout.tsx file, that is at app, then layout, because this is the beginning of our application. And these children represent the various pages of our application. And we want the navbar and the footer to be shared by all the pages. So here, if I come and say nav, and we say nav, now that nav will be shared by all the other pages, and at the bottom here we could add a footer, but we will not be doing much on our footer. So I'll just add a placeholder like that. So I'll go ahead and save that. If I check my browser here, I can go to this one. You'll see we have nav and then the 3 dots represent our footer. And what we want is the 3 dots to be at the very bottom of our page. We'll go to the body and we had already added a class name, and we'll do it here. We will add flex, and you can hover over a class name to see what it does. So this adds a style of display flex. And then we'll say flex-call. That will add a flex direction of column. And then here we'll say mean-height of screen, and that will add a mean height of 100 VH. That means that the body will occupy the entire height of our screen. Then finally, I'll say px of 2 to add some padding on the left and on the right, and I'll go ahead and save. For now, that will not do much because we'll still have both footer and nav at the top here, but we want footer to be pushed at the bottom. Now what we will do is that we'll go to these children. We can wrap it with a main tag, and remember the children represents all the other pages in our application. And here I'll add a class name flex-grow, and that will add a flex grow of 1. That means that this main will occupy the rest of the spacing that remains of our body. Let's save, go back to the browser, and you will notice that now the 3 dots are pushed at the very bottom, meaning that this hello world, which is the content or our main page, will cover the rest of the spacing. We can confirm that by adding a background color. So let's say BG, then blue, then 500. I go ahead and save. Now if I come here, you'll notice that these will occupy all this spacing, which is really cool, and that is what we want. Now I'll just remove the background color since we have confirmed it's working, and we will create this nav as a component. What you will do is minimize everything, go at the root here and add a new folder called components. Inside components, we will add another folder called layout, and in the layout is where we will add our navbar component. So I'll say navbar.tsx, create a file called navbar.tsx, and now this layout will hold the components that are for the general structure of our website, including the navbar here. Here, to create a component, I will do like this sfc, and you'll see I get a suggestion. I click on it and it creates a function, and I can say navbar. For you, it might not work because I am using an extension. So if you don't have that extension, it will not work the same. What you need to do is to click this icon for the extensions. I think yours will be right here on the left. Click on it, then you will search for simple React snippets. Click on that simple React snippets and install that extension. You might need to refresh your Visual Studio Code by closing and opening it again for that extension to work. And after doing that, you will now be able to use this shorthand SFC for stateless functional component to easily create your component like that. And now here we'll be able to return our nav tag. We can hook navbar in our layout. So I will now remove this and I'll say navbar, and it's self-closing right here. Control space, and you'll get this suggestion to auto import, and now it will be auto imported like this with these 8 alias which we configured when creating our Next.js application. I'll save the layout.tsx file and come back to the navbar. For now, we will just create the general structure of our navbar, where we add the logo here, the search, and these as placeholders without doing much, okay? Just the general structure. So we will be having 3 parts. The first one is the logo section. So let's have this div, which will be a container for the 3 parts. And then here now we'll have a div for our logo. The logo will have an icon, and then it will have the name of our site, webdev.blog. You can give it any other name if you want. So that is our logo there. Then we'll have another div here, which will be the placeholder for our search input. Then here we'll have another div, and these will have 3 parts. The first one is the theme toggle. Here we'll also be having notifications. And finally, we'll be having a user menu. And if I save and go back to our application where we have localhost, they will be listed here like that, but they should be in a row at the top here. Here, I'll say class name. And to begin with, I'll make sure that the navbar is always at the top, and I'll use a sticky. Then I'll say top to be 0, border hyphen bottom, and z-50. This is the z index so that it floats on top of the content. Then I'll say bg to be white for the light mode. So here I'll say class name, and we will flex. When I say flex, by default, the flex direction will be row. I'll justify between items at the center, and finally I'll add a gap of 8 so that when we shrink a page too much, we'll always make sure that we have a gap between those items. I go ahead and save, and we can go to the browser, and you'll see now we have the logo here, search at the center, and all these at the end there. I'll come back to the code, and we make sure that this is also in a row, and this is also in a row. We'll say class name, we will flex, and we'll make sure that the items are at the center. We'll have a gap of 1 and cursor of pointer. On the last section, we'll have a class name, and we'll say flex. We'll add a gap of 5, and SM we'll say gap of 8. So TailwindCSS is mobile first. So SM sets a mean width of 640 px, meaning that this gap of 8 will be applied on screen sizes which are 640 px and above. When on small screens, this is the style that will be applied. We have others, we have MD, and if you check at these, you'll notice that the mean width increased. We have LG, and we also have Excel, and we'll be using these breaking points to style for the different screen sizes. For now, I'll set it as SM. I'll also specify here items to be at the center, and I will save. I will go back to the browser, and now these are in a row. And by doing this, we have just set up the general structure of our nav. Now, the last thing that I'll mention in this video is you'll notice that my code is always automatically formatted whenever I save a file. And if I try to mess with the format here, I can use Shift Tab to mess with the format. I can tab to mess with the format, and when I save, it goes back to how it was. That is happening because of the extension that I am using. You can go back to the extensions again, and here you will search for Prettier, and you will get this extension called Prettier Code Formatter. Install that particular extension, and then what you need to do is to go to settings. I think you will see your settings at the bottom here on the left, but mine is right here, so I'll click on settings and go to settings. Here you will search for format, then you will see here default formatter. Make sure you set it as Prettier Code Formatter, and then you will scroll down a bit, and you'll see here we have format on save. Then you'll make sure that that is checked, and once you do that, you refresh your Visual Studio Code, maybe by closing and opening it again, and you'll be able to format the code whenever you save. So whenever I save the file, it automatically formats the code, which is easier for us to read. That is really cool. And that is it for this video. In this episode, we will work on a container component. So that means that even if you are on a big screen, there is a maximum width where our app will reach, which generally makes our app look good across many devices, even if they are bigger or smaller. What I'll do, I'll come to the components, then layout, then I'll add a new file, and I'll add a container component, stateless functional component. Click that, and then we will say container. Here we'll just have a div. We'll be passing children. We will be receiving the children as props. This is how we can do it. I'll destructure children from props, and since we are using TSX here, this means that this is a TypeScript file, and therefore we should specify the type of children here. I'll say children. then I'll say full colon, and I'll specify the type. So the type is of type React node. Here I'll say React node. Now we can take this container component and we will be able to wrap different content with it. And I want to start by wrapping the content of our navbar. So after nav here, I'll say container, and I'll move this content to be inside the container. So I will highlight that, then use Alt and the top arrow to move it upward. Then I'll also make sure that I import to clear the error, and I will save. Now this div here is what will be taken as children here, and we'll pass that inside this div. So now here we can add some styles. I'll say class name, and here I'll set a max width. We can add a custom width by using square brackets in TailwindCSS, and I'll say 1920px. So even if we are on a very large screen, we'll always maintain this maximum width for our navbar and for other parts of the application where we might want to apply this container component. Then here we'll go ahead and set our width here to be full, and then here I'll say mx-auto. So this is margin along the x-axis, margin left and right. When it's auto, we'll make sure that we have centered that container. And then here we'll say Excel. For larger screens, we'll set a padding along the x-axis to be 20. But for smaller screens here, we'll set px to be 4 and py to be 4 as well. And that is now our container component. I will save, and then I can come back here and we check what we have. Now you'll notice that since we wrapped this with a container, we are having some nice spacing around it. That is padding top and bottom and padding on the sides, and it's centered. Very nice. Now in the next video, let's work on this theme toggle. In this episode, I want us to work on the theme toggle. So we should be able to switch from dark and light mode like this. And right now we only have it like this. So to begin with, you will need to stop your development server. So Control-C to stop it. And then you will install these two packages, npm next-themes space and lucid-react. Next themes is the one that will allow us to set up our theme, and lucid react will give us the icons, that is the moon and the sun icon. Go ahead and install that. Once it's done, you can go to layout here, and we will wrap our body content with theme provider that will come from the next themes. So here, say theme provider, I can click on this to auto import it from next themes like this. I will close it like that, and I can take whole of this content, use Alt and the top arrow to wrap that content with the theme provider. So it will cover the entire of our application, including navbar, main content, and footer. The other thing that we will do is to add some props here, and right here I'll set attribute to be class, and then I'll minimize everything and go to tailwind.config.ts file, and right here dark mode full colon to be class as well, and then here I'll include a comma. Another thing that we will set at the layout is the default theme. So here I'll say default theme to be system. So if your system is already set at dark theme, by default our application will take the dark theme. If it's set at light mode, then by default it will be at light mode. After that, I'll say enable system, and finally I'll say disable transition on change like that. So set up these particular props on the theme provider and save. Also make sure that here we have dark mode as class. Now if we go to our application right now, let's go to the app and hit a refresh. Since my system is already set as dark theme, these changed to be dark theme. Our navbar is at blight mode because we had set a background color here of white. So what we could do is to say here dark, then full colon, and then I can set a background color for our navbar when it is at dark theme. So here I'll say bg-straight-950. At dark theme, our background will be like this, and I'll save. And this dark, we are able to use it like that because we have set up at our Tailwind config like this dark mode to be class, and also at our layout we said attribute here class. After doing that, we are able to use this dark right here to set up the styles for our dark mode. Now let's check. We have that background because by default my system is in dark mode. So if your system is not in dark mode, you'll not be able to see that. But don't worry, we are setting up an icon here to switch between the dark and the light mode. Another thing that I'll do is that right here at HTML, suppress hydration warning and save that file. Now we can go ahead and create a component that will enable us to switch between the light and the dark mode. We will minimize all the files here, then at components, layout, add a new file and say theme toggle.tsx. Here, stateless functional component, and we'll say theme toggle like that. Here we will return a button. The button will be having two icons. One is the moon icon. So just say moon and you'll be able to import it from Lucid React like that. Then I'll close it like that. Another icon that will be able to bring in is the sun icon from Lucid React. If I happen to save this and then we go to the navbar, we can replace this theme with our theme toggle component. So here I'll say theme toggle. I click on that to auto import and we import it like this and use it here. I will save. Now if we go to our app, we should be able to see the sun and the moon icon. Let's go. And there they are. Now we will use some Tailwind CSS classes to hide or show at specific cases, and this is how we will do it. We'll add a class name, and here by default we'll say that the sun is hidden, and when we are in dark mode like that, we'll say that the sun is displayed as block. So if you hover, you'll see when we are in dark mode we are saying display block. Now for the moon, we will say by default it will be shown, but when we are in dark mode we will say that it's hidden. So I'll go ahead and save. If we check, we should only see one icon, which is the sun icon, meaning that when we click it will go to light mode. Here we are able to get the theme from our next themes. So we'll say const. Here we will be able to destructure theme and set theme from our use theme hook. This use theme hook will come from next themes, and if I click on it, you see we get it from next themes. So let's invoke the use theme hook. Right now you can say console.log of theme to see which theme we are currently at. Another thing that we should do is that whenever you find yourself using a hook, know that you should mark that particular component as a client component. By default, these components are all server components. But to mark a component as a client component, we come at the very top and use a directive use client. And once we do that, everything will be fine. But if we omit this use client, you'll notice that we will get an error. So let's try to omit it and see the error that we get. So I'll save. Let's go to the application and look. Attempted to call useTheme from the server, but useTheme is on the client. It's not possible to invoke a client function from the server. What you need to know is that by default, all components in Next.js are server components unless you specify with this directive. So I will bring it back and I will save, and now that issue will be fixed. So I come back and look, the error is gone and we are able to see everything. Now if I go to our log here, console, you see theme is dark. Very nice. This hook gives us the theme and a function to update that theme. So what we will do here is to create a function that will help us to toggle the theme. So I'll say toggle theme like that. And in here, I'll say set theme. I will call this, and in here, I'll perform a check. I'll say if theme is equal to light, we will use a question mark here, and we will set the theme to dark. Else, use a full colon, we'll set the theme to light. So basically, if the theme is right, we'll set it to dark. If the theme is dark, we'll set it to light. So that is what that function will do. Let's remove this console log. And we need to make use of this particular function. We'll do it on the button. We'll say on click, and we'll simply say toggle theme. Now, another point where you will need to change your component to a client component is when you find yourself using these on-click event or events that happen on the browser. So on-click is a browser event, therefore you should mark this component as a client component. I'll go ahead and save that. Let's hit a refresh to make sure that everything is up to date. I will come here, let's click this. Look, we switched to the light mode. I click now, dark mode, light, dark, and it's even switching the icon. So we have successfully set up our theme toggle. All we did is to create this particular component to switch between light and dark mode. And also we installed Next themes. We added the theme provider with these particular props. And we also went to the Tailwind config, added this dark mode class so that we are able to say something like dark, and then we set up some styles for the dark mode, which is really cool. And we also used that dark here. For the dark mode, we are able to hide the sun icon, and for the light mode, we are able to hide the moon icon. So that is so cool. So I'll see you on the next one. In this episode, I want us to complete our logo, and it will look like this. We'll simply have an icon, and then we will style the word. In this course, we will be using icons from two sources. One is Lucid React, which we already installed in the last episode, and the next one is React Icons. So React Icons is very good because it have a lot of icons from many other sources, and we can directly use it in our application. The first thing that we need to do is to install React Icons, and we will run this command npm install React Icons. Just open your Visual Studio Code, open the terminal, and say npm I, it's a short form for install, and you will say React-icons. So just install it like that. Once the installation is done, you can now go to your Navbar here, and we will simply replace this icon with a notes icon. From our React icon website, we have a lot of icons from many sources, and you can happen to search here for notes icon, and then it will give you all the notes icons that are available from different sources, and you'll know by how the icons are being named. You can see this is FA, standing for font awesome, MD, I think that is material icons, and many others. So the one that we will use is from MD. Right here, I'll just say MD, then note alt. I will self-close it. If I try to auto-import it, I'm not sure if I'll get a suggestion. I do get a suggestion, and I can just click on that. And now if I come at the top, this is the import of that icon. Import MD note alt from React Icons /MD. And then right here, I'll just give these a size, and I'll say 24. Now for the word here, I'll come to the div, and I'll add a class name, and I'll set the font to be bold and text to be Excel, and I'll save. Let's go to our website, make sure that it's running, npm run dev, hit enter, and I'll come here and refresh my web page. And now look, it looks like this. And that is all about this video. In this episode, I want us to start using Shadcn UI, and we will specifically create this input component. We'll just style it. We'll not write any logic. You'll need to visit this website, ui.shadcn.com, and then right here you can click on get started, and I will go to installation. I can click on Next.js. You can see you can use it with multiple frameworks, and in this case we are using Next.js. And I'll go to right here and click on npm, and then I'll copy this command to install the latest version of Shadcn. So I'll go ahead and use the latest version. You can use the same as well. So right here I'll stop the development server and I'll paste that command, and then I'll hit enter. I'll say yes, so I'll just hit enter and it will start installing Shadcn UI. Then here it will ask you which style would you like to use, and I'll go with that New York. And then here, which color would you like to use as the base color? I think I'll go with slate. And would you like to use CSS variables for theming? I'll just say yes. And then how would you like to proceed? So it looks like you are using React 19. Some packages may fail to install due to peer dependency issue in npm. Okay, I'm not sure if this will create any issue, but I'll proceed with use force. In case we face any issues, we will resolve them. It's success. The thing that I need us to do is to open this Tailwind config, and Shadcn added another class here. So we don't need to repeat ourselves. So just remove one of them and save that. So how do we get to use Shadcn components? That is the big question that we might have right now. The way we do it, we install a component when we need it, and that is very good because it keeps our application to be lightweight, unlike other UI libraries like Material UI, where it installs all the Material UI library in your application, making it so heavy and so big. But with Shadcn UI components, we install a component whenever we want to use it. We don't have to install everything and make our application so huge. We'll come here and I want to install an input component. So I'll just search input here and I'll click on input. It will show you how to use that particular component. It have the code there, and it have the instruction at the bottom here on how to install the component. And here I'll say npx shadcn at latest add input, and that will install the input component in our application. So I'll copy that particular command, and then I'll open the application here and paste it there. I'll hit enter. So it's checking and so on, and created one file, and you'll notice it's created inside our components folder, inside UI folder, and it's named as input.tsx. So just go right here and open the components folder. Now you'll notice we have a new folder called UI. This UI folder was added by Shadcn, and it also added this input component, and you can see we already have the code for input component here, and it's written in TailwindCSS. That means that if you would like to manipulate this particular input component and customize it further, you can do it just in here, which is really cool. But we will not change it. We'll just make use of it to create our search input. So I'll remove that and I'll minimize everything. Go to components, then layout, and I'll add a new file. I'll call this file search input.tsx stateless functional component, and I'll say search input. We will be able to return a div, and in here we'll have two things. The first thing that I'll have is a search icon, and this search icon will come from Lucid React. So I'll import it and then I'll close it like that. And then another thing that I'll have is now the input component, and now this input component will come from our UI stroke input. This is the component that we installed with Shadcn. So I'll just also close it like that. In this case, we'll just add some styles. To begin with, let's have a placeholder saying search, and then at the end here I'll add a class name, and we'll have padding to the left of 10, bg hyphen primary and then stroke 10, and these will add a background color to it of this particular value. And we are able to use this bg primary, bg secondary, because Shadcn added those particular classes in our Tailwind config. You can see we have things like colors as background, foreground, and then if you scroll, you will see we have things like primary, secondary, we have muted. These were added when we were adding Shadcn UI library in our application. So I'll go ahead and save that. At this point, let's preview our application. npm run dev. So nothing have changed because we created that component, search input component, but we didn't hook it up at our navbar. So come right here and we need to replace this search with our search input. I'll click on that suggestion and it will be auto imported like this, and then I close it like that and save. I'll go back to the website and right now it looks like this. Now what I would like to do is to move this search in here. And another thing that you might have noticed, we selected the default style for our Shadcn UI components, and you can see now this border changed to be light. So that change happened due to Shadcn UI. Before it was so white, if you remember. Let's fix this style here, and what I'll do, I'll go to the search input, I'll come to the div here, and I'll add a class name. I'll make this div to be displayed as relative, and if you hover, you'll notice that that is what happens. Position is relative, and then I'll say it will be hidden by default, but in larger screens we will show it. This is positioned as relative, but for our search here, we'll make it to be absolute. So I'll say absolute, and then we can be able to position it. So I'll say top to be 3, then left to be 4. Another thing that I'll do is that I'll specify the height, so h4, and width to be 4. Another thing is to change its outlined color. Currently it's white, so if I check it, you'll see it's white. Right now it's at correct position, but it's white. I want it to be similar color as this placeholder. So what I will do is to come here and add a text color. I'll say text hyphen muted hyphen foreground. Again, this color was added by Shadcn installation. So I'll go ahead and save. I'll come back here and look, it looks good. Very nice. And that is it. That is all I want right now for this search input. Later on, we'll be coming and adding logic to it. In this episode, we will work on this styling for our notification, where we have an icon and we are able to click that icon and show a drop-down menu. We will make use of Shadcn components to create this particular drop-down, and it's pretty easy to do it with Shadcn. I'll go to Shadcn here and I can search for drop-down, and I'll see drop-down menu. I click on it and we will create a drop-down like this one. I click on open and it have this drop-down. So I think depending on the position, it shows either at the top or at the bottom. And look, it's at the bottom. The only thing that we'll do is to change the icon and the content. So what I'll do is to go right here for installation, click on npm, and I will copy this command. Make sure to stop the development server, and I do that installation for drop-down menu. Now I'll think I will force it, so I'll hit enter. I think the versions are mismatching for some reason, but in case we face any issues, I'll resolve them. After the installation, what we will do, if you go to components UI, you'll notice that now we have drop-down menu, and drop-down menu will export a lot of components from here, and you can see all these exports are from this drop-down menu file. So we'll make use of some of these. Okay, so what I need to do is to go to components, layout, add a new file, and we will say notifications.tsx. I'll say stateless functional component, hit enter, notifications. Right here we'll be able to return something. I'll say import and I'll be able to destructure those components from at stroke components stroke UI stroke drop down menu. And from that particular file, I will be able to bring in the drop down menu, and then I'll bring in the drop down menu content, and then I'll import drop down menu item, and finally I will import drop down menu trigger. And now I'll make use of these components right here. I'll start with the drop down menu, that is like the parent, and then inside the drop down menu I'll have the drop down menu trigger, and this is the one that will hold our notification icon and it will trigger our drop down menu to open. So inside the drop down menu trigger, I'll have the bell icon, and this bell icon will be coming from Lucid React. Let's give it a size of 20, and after this drop down menu trigger, I'll have the drop down menu content. So drop down menu content. Right here I'll add a class name. I'll say width to be 100% like this. Then I'll set a max width to be 400 px. So this is basically the width of our notification content. And then in here I can have a div. Basically at the top I'll have notifications. Let me show you with the live site here. If I click, I'll have here notifications and then mark all as read. So in this div I want to add these two. So I'll have a h3 that says notifications, a button which says mark all as read. Here I'll add a class name, and I will say font -bold and text to be large. For this div, I'll say class name, and I'll flex the heading and the button, and I'll say gap to be 4, justify to be between, margin to the bottom of 2, and padding all around of 2. Like that. Now I save. Right now we already have the trigger, so if I click the trigger, we should be able to open this drop down menu content. And let's hook this notification component inside our navbar. I will come right here where we have notifications, and I will remove that, and I'll simply say notifications. I will save, make sure that it's imported like that, npm run dev. So once it's running, I'll come back here and hit a refresh, and we have this notification icon, which when I click, it opens this pop-up notification and mark all as read. Right here at our drop-down trigger, I want to work on more styles. Here I'll add a class name, and I'll say relative, and then right here I will add a div. This div will be showing the notification count, and in here I'll say span. For now, let's assume that we have 5 notifications, so I'll place number 5 there hard-coded, and then right here I'll add a bunch of class names from TailwindCSS. I'll say that this is absolute, so it will be absolute to this drop-down trigger, which is relative, and then I'll say bg to be rows -500, so it will be color red, height to be 6, and width to be 6, so that is a square, but I want it to be round, so right here I'll say rounded to be full, text to be small, then I want the number to be at the center, so let's say flex items -center, justify center. I will position it now, bottom to be 2 and left to be 2. Now I save that, and we should be having now a count of 5, which is hard-coded. So let's check it out, and there we go. So we have a notification icon with 5 there, and later on in the course we'll be able to dynamically display the number of notifications that we have in our system. So I think this is good enough for now, but later on we'll be coming back to this particular component and working more on it and show real notifications. So in the next video, let us work on this user menu design. In this episode, we will work on this user button where we have an avatar, and when we click, we get a drop down of link. We already installed a drop down component from Shadcn. Another thing that we will install from Shadcn is an avatar component. So I'll just say avatar and then click on avatar here, and right here I'll just copy, then go to my code editor, and right here I'll stop the development server and add the avatar component like that. I will force it to install, and it's adding that component. Once it's done, I'll go to components, then layout, then I'll add a new file. I'll call this file UserButton.tsx, and then state as functional component, hit enter and say user button. So I'll just say drop down menu. I think I should get a suggestion. Make sure you are importing it from UI drop down menu. So I'll click on that one and it's imported. We'll have a drop down menu trigger. Make sure it's also from UI. Now in here is where I'll make use of the avatar component. So I'll say avatar, and this will now come from UI avatar. It will be able to accept something in here. The first thing that I can add is an avatar image from UI avatar, and I'll do it like that. This will expect us to add an src, or the source of the image. For now, I'll leave it as empty, but once we add users, we'll be able to dynamically get the image for the user. Then right here, I'll go ahead and have a fallback. So I'll say avatar fallback. This will show when the image doesn't show, and in here I will use an icon from Lucid React, and I'll say user round. Make sure it's from Lucid React like that. Right now I can save, and I'll hook this user button to our navbar. Let me close the notification one, and right here is where I'm supposed to have the user button, and I will save. Let's run the application, npm run dev, and hit enter. So I get an error, user button is not defined, but I think it's because I did not import it. So I'll click here, use control space and hit enter to import that user button and save. It auto refreshed, and let's see. And look, we already have these right here. When I click, we don't get anything. That is because we have not added the drop down menu content. So right here I'll say drop down menu content, and then in here I'll be having some drop down menu items. So I'll say drop down menu item. Make sure I import it from UI drop down menu. In the drop down menu item, I will add a button. This button will be having an icon in here of user, and I'll bring the user from Lucid React. So that is an icon. I'll give this a size of 18, and at the end here I'll use space and say profile. Then in this button I'll add a class name, and I'll give these styles flex, items, center, and gap of 2. I will go ahead and save that file. Now that we added drop down menu content and an item in it, we will be able to see something whenever we click on that particular icon. So I click on this, and look, I get profile. Very nice. So let's add the other items for our menu. I will come back. They will all be having the drop down menu item, and they'll be having a similar structure. What I can add here is a separator, and I'll say drop down menu separator from UI drop down menu, and I'll self close it. And then I highlight this section, and I can copy and hit enter, and I'll paste. So here I'll say create post. I will use an icon from Lucid React called pencil, and I'll click on that to import. Let's add more. Come to the end here, hit enter and paste again. Here I'll remove that, and I'll say bookmark. Remove user. For bookmark, we will get an icon from React icons called reg bookmark. Make sure to click this one, and that will be imported from React icons /FA, which stands for font awesome.
And the size here, I'll adjust it a bit because the sizes of Lucid React icons and those of React icons are not the same. I will highlight these again. Actually, we already copied. I'll come and paste again. So here, I'll go ahead and say admin. I will use a different icon called shield. I'll come to the end here of drop down menu separator and paste again. I will say sign out. So I'll be using this to sign out a user, and I'll come right here and I'll say log out icon from Lucid React. I will save that file. Now, if I come back to the browser, look, we already have all those items. I will remove this last drop-down menu separator because this is the last item on that list, and save. And then I'll come back to the top here, and I would like to add some styles on the avatar fallback here. I'll say class name. I will add a border of 2, and then I'll say border hyphen straight hyphen 500. That will be the border color. But for dark, we'll say border hyphen straight hyphen 50, which is almost white. And I will save those changes. I can go back to preview, and now we'll have a border around our icon, and it will change depending on whether we are on light or dark mode.
So far we have been able to work on our navbar and included this nice design right there using TailwindCSS. And there is one last thing that I would like us to do in this section before we proceed to the next one, and that is pushing our code to GitHub, because right now we have made a lot of changes in our application and we would not like to lose these changes in case our computer was damaged or our local source code was deleted by mistake. We will still have the code on GitHub and be able to access it. So what you will need is to go to github.com. If you don't have an account, you will need to create one first, and then you will just go to your profile. You'll click on repositories. Right here you'll see new repository. You'll create a new repository and you will give it a name. In this case, I'll say web dev blog. You can give a description. You can say whether your repository is public or private. For now, I'll keep it private, and I'll just create that repository on GitHub. We have the instructions right here for creating a local repository, connecting the local repository with this remote repository, and then pushing the code to this remote repository. So the first step was already done for us when creating the application. That is, the local repository was created, and we can already see that we have a gitignore file here. So all we need to do is to connect this local repository with our remote repository and then push the code. At the terminal, I'll stop the server. Let's start by adding the changes for commit, and then we commit the changes, and then we connect the remote repository and push the changes. So we need to start from here where we add the changes for a commit. So here I'll say git add, and then I'll use a star to add all the changes. And one thing that we need to make sure is that we are not adding the node modules to the changes, because node modules is so heavy and we can always install it. But from my gitignore, we are already ignoring node modules folder, so that we will not push this folder to GitHub, and we can always install all the libraries by making use of this package.json file, which keeps track of all the libraries that we are using and their versions, so we don't need to push node modules. Okay, so here git add all and hit enter. We will now commit this, and I'll say git commit -m space, and here we will add a message for our commit. This is the format that I'll be using. I'll say fit :, and then what we did, the main thing that we have done is created the navbar like that. So fit stands for feature. If we were fixing something, we'll say fix. I'll go ahead and hit enter. Let's come back here. We need to create a main branch like this. So I'll copy this command and I'll come here and paste it. I'll hit enter, and just like that, we created a main branch. And the next thing that we will do is to connect our local repository with this remote repository. Copy this and I will paste. So I'll go ahead and hit enter. Right now, the changes are committed on our local repository. You can see we no longer see those many changes here. All we need to do now is to push those changes to this repository which we have connected to. So I'll just say git push -u origin main, paste that, and I'll hit enter. We give it some time and it will add our code to our GitHub. And as you can see, it have completed. To confirm if it was added to GitHub, just come back here and hit a refresh here. We can see now the files. This is so good because now when we are proceeding, whenever we make a change, we push our code to GitHub, and that way we'll never lose our progress. In this section, you will learn how to add pages in our application. And if you come to the app, you'll see we already have this page.tsx file, and I already told you that this page.tsx file is our home page. But how can we be able to add more pages like the login page, register page, profile page, and so on? Next.js uses a file-based routing system where we can be able to create some folders and files to add more pages in our app. And this is how we do it. So just click on app and add a new folder. And let's assume that we want to create a login page. You will just say login here and hit enter. We have to add a file in this particular folder. So I'll create a new file and I'll say page.tsx. And then inside this file, we need to export a component, and I'll say stateless functional component, hit enter, and I'll say login. And then right here, I can just have some React fragments. Let's just say login. I'll save that file. Now, inside our app, we created a folder called login, and then inside the login, we added a file called page.tsx. So you must name your file like this. If you use a different name, it will not work. And now this is our login page. So we'll get to access it by using the root URL and then saying stroke login, the name of this folder. Okay, so I can come here and we can try to see if the content will change here by saying stroke login, and I'll hit enter. Once it loads, look, we have login here and our navbar remains because our navbar it's at the root layout. So at the layout here, we added the navbar here, and I told you these children will be the different pages. So navbar will be consistent in all pages of our application, and then children is the different pages. That includes, this is the home page, and now we have added a login page. Now, how could we add a register page? It's a similar process. So I'll add a new folder inside our app. I will say register, hit enter, and then inside register, I'll add a new file and I'll say page.tsx. I will hit enter, and now right here, we are expected to export a component, stateless functional component, and I'll say register. I can return some JSX and I'll say register. I will go ahead and save that file. And by just doing that, we have created two pages. One is the login page. The other one is the register page. How do we get to access the register page? I'll just come right here and I will say register. I will hit enter. And just like that, we have register right there. Now in Next.js, there is a way to combine the different pages or group them. And this is how we would need to do. Inside app, I'll create a new folder. I will use these brackets like that. And in here, I'll say auth. Once I do like this folder will not be part of our URL, but it will be useful in grouping our pages. I'll highlight and highlight this one. I'll Control C, come to auth and Control V. So as you can see right now, we have app, then we have auth. Inside auth, we have login and register. I'll go ahead and I'll delete this and this one. So I'll highlight it, click on this, Control, click on this, and then Shift delete, and I'll permanently delete those two. Once we do it like this, we will still access our login page by saying root URL and then stroke login. This auth will not be part of our URL, but it's helpful in our folder structure here because it groups our features. We know everything to do with auth will now be available in this auth folder. And once we expand it, we get everything about auth, which is cool. So let's test this. So I'll come back here and I can say login. I hit enter and look, we get login. And if we try at all to say auth here, it will not work. If I say auth, that doesn't work. And even if I include exactly the way it is with the brackets, that will also give us 44 because this auth is used for grouping and it's not part of our URL. If you want to create nested pages where we have stroke auth, stroke login, you will not need to include those brackets. So if we needed to say a URL that have stroke auth, stroke login, we will need to come to app here, create a new folder, and this time just say auth. And then inside that folder, you can add now a new folder and you'll say login. And inside login, you'll add the page.tsx file. And in here, you'll need now to export a component. So this is how you would create a nested page where we have auth and then login and then page. So to access that, you'll need to come here and say auth and hit enter. Now look, we have this auth login which we accessed through auth folder and then through login folder. And remember, you could also have a page at the top level here at the auth here. So in auth folder, this one, we have login folder with the page, but remember, you can also have a page inside auth. So I can add a file and I'll say page.tsx and status functional component. I'll add a div and I'll say auth. I will save. So here, let's explore the folder structure. If I expand auth, we have login, and under login we have page, and also inside login we have another page. So this page, it's at the same level with this login folder. And how we access this page here where we have auth is by just saying root URL stroke auth. Then you get access to this page. And if you want to go to the login page, you'll say root URL stroke auth stroke login, and then you get to this auth login page. So let's test that. So right now we are in auth login, which gives us auth login, but we can also access just auth, and that is it. So as you can see, this is how we can add nested pages where we have auth, and then inside auth we have a page, and we have a login which is nested page inside our auth, which is cool. In our application, I'll be using this format where I just group our two auth pages there. So I'll go ahead and remove this one here. So I'll click on this one and I'll shift delete. In the next video, let me show you how you can be able to add dynamic pages in our application. In this episode, I'll show you how we can be able to add dynamic routes in our Next.js 15 application. And let me show you an example of one use case where we will be using dynamic routes, and that is user profiles. When I get to visit one of these users, we get to the user profile here, and you'll notice the URL here, we have this user ID, and it's the same that I am showing here dynamically. Using this user ID on our URL, it's so important because each user will have their own unique pages, and those are user profiles. And being able to create dynamic routes in Next.js is important because we will be able to automatically create all those pages whenever a user creates their account. So we won't need to hard code those values, okay? And let's use this user profile example. I will go to app, and we simply need to add a new folder in app, and I'll say user. Inside user, I'll create a new folder, and I will use these square brackets, and this is the dynamic part of our page or our URL. Here I'll say ID, or you could say user ID, and I'll hit enter. Inside this ID, I'll create a new file now, and I'll say page.tsx. We will create this particular component, stateless functional component, and I'll say user. Here let's return something. And just like that, we have been able to create a dynamic page which depends on this particular dynamic segment or section of our URL. And how do we get to access this page? We will just come to the browser here. First of all, we go to the first folder, which is user. Then we go to the second folder, which is dynamic. So I could say the user ID in this case is 1, or the ID is 1. I hit enter, and just like that, we will be able to access that page. This part here is now dynamic. We can say 2. And look, we still get the same page. We are showing the same content, but we could differentiate it by trying to show this ID of the user right here. And let's see how we can be able to access this dynamic part of the URL in our component and use it to either fetch more details about the user or just show it on the UI. Each Next.js component will come with a props value called params, and I can be able to extract that params from our props right here. So I'll use these curly brackets and I'll say params. This is getting the params value from props. How do we get to read these params? In Next.js 15, these params is a promise, and it will return the value of our dynamic section right here, which is this ID. And in Next.js 15, by default, this is a server component, and we can simply make it to be an async function. So here, I'll say async, and by doing that, we'll be able to await these params. And right here, I'll be able to say const. We will destructure the values from params to be equal to await, and I'll say params. Right here, I'll be able to read the values of our dynamic sections. In this case, we only have ID here. So I'll go ahead and say here ID, and we can show this ID right here. Curly brackets ID. We read this as a JavaScript variable in JSX. So again, these params is a promise, and it will return this dynamic part of our URL. So if I say ID, it should be exactly the same as we named the folder, so that we get that value and we get to await that params and we read it like that. And we can use this ID right here to fetch the data from the server, because this is a server component. It runs on the server. So here you could fetch, and we'll be doing that later on in the course, could fetch data using the ID param. Let's see if we get this value. This complains right now because I haven't added the type, but I'll add. For now, it will still work. So let's save and go to the browser. And look, we are able to get these 2, which is coming from our URL. And if I say here that this is 4 and save, look, we get 4. And just like that, you could have any value right here. The value of the user could be that long. Hit enter. We are able to get it from the URL, and we can use that ID to get the user data and show it on the UI. Now, to add the type for these params, you can come right here, use a full colon, and we'll say params is of type a promise that will resolve to this particular ID. So just say promise that will resolve to an object that will have the dynamic section, which is the ID, and the ID here will be of type string, and that is the type of our params. In the next episode, let me show you how we can get to add nested layouts in our application. In this episode, you will learn about nested layouts in Next.js. Right now, we only have one layout, which is our root layout. If you go to app, then layout, this is the root layout, and it is being shared by all the other pages in our application. So all the pages that we will have, they will have a title like this one. But it is possible to specify the title, description, icons for specific pages, and also fonts by making use of nested layouts. For example, if we come to auth here, we could add a layout for our auth segment, and I'll add a new file in auth and I'll call it layout.tsx. And then right here we create a component, stateless functional component. The name doesn't really matter, but we can say auth layout. The only thing that matters is this file, the naming should be layout.tsx. And then right here we can be able to return something. In this case I will return a div. Then right here we'll be able to receive props, and the prop that we'll receive is the children prop, the same as our layout here where we received children. And then we had this particular type, read only children of type React node. So what I will do is to copy this part here, and I'll come right here and I'll say full colon and I paste it here. So I will save to auto format. Basically we are receiving the children prop, which we will be able to show right here. Now these children will be the different pages under our auth segment, meaning that the layout will now be shared by our login page, register page, and any other page that we would add in auth. And to confirm that, we could have a navbar for our auth, and right here I'll just say nav and I'll say auth nav, and this part of our layout will now be shared by these pages. So let's see if that works. I will go to the browser. Let's visit one of the pages, which was login, hit enter, and there we go. We have this auth nav, and I can come here and I'll say register. I hit enter, and look at register, we also have this auth nav. So it is being shared between those two pages. But if I happen to visit our user page and we have an ID of a user like one, you'll notice that we don't have that auth nav because that particular layout is only shared by our auth segment. So this is how you could add a nested layout. You can also add a title for the auth segments. So what I could do is to come here and I copy this metadata object, and at the top here I will enter and I'll paste it here. I'll make sure to import metadata type. So I'll click here, control space, and I'll be able to import that from Next. Now right here we could say auth web dev blog, and you can have a specific description and so on. For now, let me just remove the two and specify the title, and I will save. Let's confirm if our login and register page will have this specific title. For now, for our user profile, we have this as the title, but I could go to login. We go to login, and look, the title at the top there changed to auth web dev blog. We could have different title, different description, different icon, and also different fonts because we have this nested layout which is now shared there. Now you could also add a layout at user, and that layout will be specific for pages that will be available in the user folder there. And this is just to show you, so I'll go ahead and remove it. Now in the next video, what I'll show you is how to create links between the different pages which we have already created. Right now, all we are doing is to come to the URL and navigate to a specific page. But I want us, for example, when we click profile here, I want it to take us to the user profile. So we'll see how we can do that in the next video. In this video, we will see how we can be able to navigate between the different pages, and there are two main ways in which we can do that in Next.js. Next.js comes with an inbuilt hook called useRouter, and it also have an inbuilt component called link. Link component is built on top of the a tag. Link is good when we have a server-side component, but when we make use of the useRouter hook, whenever we make use of a hook, that means that we must mark that component as a client component. So we only make use of the useRouter in a client component, but for the link, we can use it in both server components and client components. I can go to the components folder, layout, then Navbar. After this user button, let's add a link to our login. We will use this link component. So right here, I'll say control space and I'll import it from next link. It expects us to pass a prop called href, and then we can specify the path. We'll say that this will be going to stroke login. Right here, we can say login, and I save. Now on our navbar, we will have login, and once we click that login, it will take us to stroke login. And currently, you can see this component doesn't have use client at the top there, and its parent don't have use client as well, meaning that this is a server component, and we can be able to use this link component to navigate even if we are working with the server component. So let's come here. You see we have login. I will click on login, and that should take us to the stroke login page, just like that. Now for register, instead of using the link component, I want us to make use of the use router hook. And currently I told you this navbar is being rendered from the server. So for us to make use of the use router hook, we must mark this navbar as a client component. But instead of making the entire of the navbar to be a client component, we could create a component specifically for the register route, and then we can make that component to be client component. So let's actually do that. Right here, I can say register route, then I'll say register, actually I'll say register button, okay, like that. And I can rename this to register button. That is much more better. And we'll make this to be actually a button. I'll say button register. I will make this component to be a client component by coming here and saying use client. And now right here, I'll be able to make use of the use router hook from next navigation. This is the latest one, and we invoke that, and here I'll say const router is equals to use router, and we invoke it. So we will add an on-click event here, and we'll say arrow function here, and right here we'll have now router dot push. We invoke that, and we specify the path or the route is register. Once we click on this button, we'll be able to go to the register with the help of our use router hook. So let's make use of this register button in our navbar. I can come here and I'll say register button, and I get an auto suggestion here, and then I self close it like that. Now if I navigate to the top here, you'll see it's coming from our register button. What we have done, we have created this register button, and we have made it to be a client component, and once we click on it, it will take us to the register page. So let's test that. I'll come back here, and look, we have register here. Let's click on register, and there we go. We are now on the register page. We can click on login. We are on login page. For login, we made use of the link component. For register, we made use of the use router hook. So you could use both, but I want to be consistent, and in this case I'll just make use of the link component for both. So I'll just duplicate this link component, and I'll say here register. It's also easier to do this, right? And I'll say here register, and for this one I will remove it. There are situations where we'll be making use of that use router, but for now we can just make use of the link component. The thing is, I have showed you how to use this early in the course, so let me remove this component just to show you how to make use of that use router. And let's be consistent in this case with the link component. Let's go to register. We go to the register, login, we go to login. So this link component is built on top of our A tag. You can see a component that extends HTML A element to provide prefetching and client-side navigation between routes. Let's make sure that we push our changes to GitHub, where we have added our login, register, and the user page and added link between them. If you come right here to this icon, this is our source control. If I click on this, you'll see we can be able to directly push our changes to GitHub from here. So I'll write the commit message here and I'll say created, login, register, and user pages, and I commit. Once I commit, I can sync changes. So this is pushing the code to GitHub. I click on that one and I think they were pushed. So we can confirm by going to GitHub. So on GitHub, go to repositories and visit your repository for this project. I have the commit, created, login, register, and user pages. So that is good. Now in the next section, I want us to start working on our login and register forms. So I'll see you on the next one. Welcome to this section. In this section, we will work on our login form and our user registration form. We will be making use of React Hook Form package or library and Zod to both create our form and validate them. Another thing that we'll be making use of a lot is TypeScript. And in this video, I'll start by giving you an introduction to TypeScript in case you don't know what TypeScript is and why we need it. The first thing that you need to know about TypeScript is that it is a strongly typed programming language that builds on JavaScript. So TypeScript is built on top of JavaScript. Under the hood, we'll still be making use of JavaScript. TypeScript is a strongly typed programming language. On the other hand, JavaScript is a loosely typed programming language. That means that JavaScript is not strict on types, while TypeScript is strict on types. The thing is, when using TypeScript, we will be able to catch errors early in our code editor. But if we were to make use of JavaScript, there are some type errors which will not be able to catch early in our code editor unless we run the code and we catch those errors when running the code. But with TypeScript, we'll catch them early in our code editor. And another thing is that TypeScript will help us to give us some nice suggestions when coding, so we'll be able to even code faster when making use of TypeScript. And I want to show you an example of how TypeScript is a strongly typed programming language and JavaScript is a loosely typed programming language. So let's just dive into the code editor. Here we had this page. By default, we are already making use of TypeScript. Whenever we created this project, we specified that we'll be using TypeScript and TailwindCSS, and those were automatically configured in our project. Actually, let me show you. If you come to the files, you'll see we have tsconfig.json. Another thing is that if you come to package.json file, you'll notice that we installed types node, types react, types react DOM, and this was done by Next.js automatically when creating the project. So this is a good thing with Next.js. We don't have to configure TypeScript manually or TailwindCSS manually. They will be done for us and we just need to start using them. Now right here, let's define a name. Let name be equal to Charles. Once we do it like this, TypeScript will automatically know that name is of type string. This is called type inference in TypeScript. And if we try to give this name a different type, it will complain. So let's redefine name to be a number of 89. And just like that, if we hover here, type number is not assignable to type string. If we have this as a string and we try to give it a different type of number, TypeScript automatically knows. If we tried to use JavaScript, JavaScript will not throw such an error. It will not give us a warning. And let's test that. I'll click on user and I'll add a new file. Let's call it page.jsx. Now notice the difference. Here we used TSX, here I used JSX, meaning that in this page, I'll be able to make use of JavaScript and I won't need to define types. So another good thing with TypeScript, as you can see, we can have both JavaScript and TypeScript running in our project, which is cool. So you can gradually adapt TypeScript in your project. If at all you find TypeScript being so complex, you can still use JavaScript, which is cool. So I'll copy the content of this page and I'll paste in our JSX file. But you'll notice here we have an error, and this is because we are using types in a JavaScript file. And if I hover, type annotation can only be used in TypeScript files. So I will need to remove that, and I save, and you can see that this is not complaining about our name because JavaScript is loosely typed. It is dynamically typed. You can change the type of the variable anytime you want. You can use an array here, then return use an object here, and you can go ahead and now make use of this right here. JavaScript doesn't care about the type. You can display the name on the page by saying name.name, and it will not complain, it will work. So if I visit this page, user, first of all, make sure your project is running, npm run dev, then I go to localhost 3000 / user. Now look, user profile, and we get Charles here. And you can see it doesn't even complain about the params, even though we don't have any params. JavaScript doesn't care. You just define stuff and it will not complain. But with TypeScript, if we try to do something like this, I copy, I come here, and I replace here. Look, it doesn't know what this is. Name does not exist in this type. So that is the big difference between TypeScript and JavaScript. TypeScript is strongly typed, JavaScript is loosely typed. Let's scroll down here and look here. We have a function which accepts array here, but in our code we are using ORR. So we don't have anything like ORR. So that would throw an error whenever we run the code. But with the TypeScript, we will be able to catch these early in our code editor. No editor warnings in JavaScript files. This code crashes at runtime, but with TypeScript, that will be shown in our code editor, which is cool. If I scroll down, you'll see we can be able to describe the shape of our data with TypeScript by making use of an interface or a type. So we could use either interface keyword or type keyword. In most cases, they work the same, but don't worry right now. Just know that you can use interface or type to describe the shape of the data. So let's see an example in our project. I'll go ahead and remove this page.jsx file. That was just an example. Then in our page.tsx file, we could describe the shape of our user. In this case, I want to remove this one. Let's say interface user will have an email of type string. It will have a name of type string. And now if we happen to create the user here, const user is equals to an object, we can give this user the type, which will be this interface. So here I'll just use a full colon user, and this will make sure that user follows this particular structure. So here I must say that user is having an email and the email is a string, so I'll say a string of Charles, and also it must have a name. So if we don't add a name and we hover here, you'll see property name is missing in type this one, but required in type user, and the name must be a string. So the email can be charles@gmail. Now if we try to give the name a different type, like a number 89, and I hover, it will complain. Type number is not assignable to type string. So the name must be a string as we defined here. By using the quotes, that means that this is now a string. Another thing that I would want to show you is that you can make the types to be optional. For example, the name here could be optional by using a question mark there. And now these can be omitted and it will not complain because we made this optional. And if I hover, you will see it could be a string or it could be undefined. So undefined means that you don't have to specify it. Let me return it. Another thing is that you could have multiple types for the name. For example, we can say the name is a string, then use a pipe like that and say number. So this means that this name could be a string like this, or it could be a number like this, and it will not complain because we specified it right here. But you cannot use something like a boolean, which is true or false. So if I say true, that complains. Type boolean is not assignable to type string or number. Another thing that you could do with this is that you can say the name is of any type. So that means that we could use a boolean, we could use a number, we could use a string, but that defeats the purpose of TypeScript. So I don't recommend that you use any, but there are cases where you use external libraries, you don't know the types, you can use any, or you can use unknown. So I told you, you could either use an interface or a type to declare the shape of the data. In this case, we are making use of an interface. Now let's try the type. The type, you'll say type user, then you'll need to have an equal sign here, and it will still work. There are a few differences between using type and interface, but you don't really need to worry much about them. You can use them interchangeably in most cases, and you'll be seeing more examples as we move on with the course. And now, as we move on with our forms, when we create some interfaces for our forms, at least you'll know what is happening. We are simply defining the structure of our data that will be in the form. And the more you use TypeScript, the more you'll understand it. I also highly recommend that you can go through the documentation here. You can go to docs and go to TS for new programmers or TypeScript for JS. And then it will explain to you what TypeScript is, the different ways in which we can create our types and so on. Now, right here, we were able to also define the types for the params, and we use some angle brackets like these. These are called generics, and in creating the form, we'll be creating a generic. Therefore, I'll be explaining more about this generic. All you need to know right here is that the params here, we are saying that it will return a promise, and that promise will resolve into an object having an ID of string. In the next video, let's go ahead and create a reusable input field by making use of React hook form. I will remove this part and I'll see you in the next one. In this episode, let's create an input field which we'll be able to reuse in our forms. Go to components and add a new folder. We'll say common, and here we'll add some components which we'll be able to reuse in our application. I'll add a new file and I'll say form field.tsx, then status functional component, and we can say form field. So we create a form field component, and for now let's return a div. So this form field component will be receiving some props, and we will add the types for those props. So here I simply want to create an interface. I'll say interface form field props. I'll open that in brackets, and now I can describe the data that I'll be receiving. I'll be having an ID of type string, a type, and I'll say the type is a string as well, disabled, and we'll say that is a boolean. We'll be able to pass a placeholder, which is a must, and I'll say that will be a string. We will be able to pass a function called register. This function is useful to add the input state to our React hook form. The type will be coming from React hook form. So we need to install React hook form in our application. Control J to pop the terminal, Control C to stop the development server, and say npm I react-hook-form. You could use the latest version because React hook form is generally a very stable library. So I'll hit enter. Now once React hook form is installed, I'll be able to import these. I'll say import id structure, and these will be coming from react-hook-form. I'll bring in use form register like that. So the type of register will be this use form register, which will come from our React hook form. Now this will actually complain and if I hover, you'll see generic type use form register require one type argument. So this use form register is what we call a generic. A generic is basically like a variable for the types. And here I should pass these angle brackets and it expects one type argument. So I should be able to pass a type here. For now, let's say any, but we should not use any. We should specify the types there. But for now, if I say any, the error disappears. I'll come back to this later. We will have errors. The type for these will be coming also from our React hook form. And the type for these will be field errors. We import that from React hook form. Like that. Another thing that we will be having for this is a label. I could add it right here. It will be optional label and I'll say it's a string, and then we will be having an input class name. So we will be able to pass class names to this input, and therefore we can customize input fields individually. Now let's come right here. We will be able to add an input field. This input field will be able to accept various props. An ID. ID is the one that we receive through props of ID. But right now, actually, there's something that we haven't done. We just defined the interface, which is the form field props. And if we try to use ID here, it doesn't recognize this name because we should accept the props right here. So right here, I'll be having the props and they'll be of type our form field props. Form field props, and now right here I can be able to import all this automatically. I'll say I, and it gives me ID, T, it gives me type. So this is the auto completion that I was telling you about that Typescript gives us. We'll have disabled. If I just press P, we have placeholder, we'll have label, we'll have input class name, we'll have register, we'll have errors. Then now here for the input, we specify the ID is ID, and then we'll say disabled, and we give that the value of disabled. We will be having the placeholder value, and then right there we'll have the type, which will be type. Right here we'll have the curly brackets, and I will spread register and I'll invoke it. Now this register is this one that we get it right here through props. Right here, it will expect us to have a value. The value will be of ID. So the ID will be saying something like email, and we will register that email as an input to our React hook form. And that email now will be available in our data whenever we want to access the data. Later on, we'll be seeing how we'll be accessing the data and reading the errors. So this ID will also be important when reading the errors. And right now it works, but this register, we need to actually specify the type here. And for a login form, let's say interface login values, we'll be having an email type string, password of type string as well. And we can pass now these login values right here at this generic, like that. Now what this does is that this input will only accept these two values, email and password, as the ID there. And that ID is the one that we are registering here. You'll see it complains because ID is a string, and now we get argument of type string is not assignable to parameter of type email or password. I told you now, if we do it like this, the register will only accept the values that we added here, email or a password. And to make it to conform with that particular type, we'll say ID as, and then right here I'll use path, and this path will come from React hook form. So I'll import it, and then I'll use this generic again, and I'll specify the login values. Now this ID can accept both the email and the password, and if we pass it to the register which accepts email or password, it will work. Later on, we'll be changing these because I want this input field to be more flexible than this. I want this input field to accept values for a login form, and I want it to accept value for a register form. For registration, we could have a name. We could be having other input fields like for the comment, for descriptions, and so on. This is the simplest way in which you get to understand the simpler version, so that when I expand it, it won't be as confusing. Okay. And what I want to do is to come right here and add a class name. We will be making use of the cn function, So I'll say cn. This function we created early in our course, and we are able to combine classes here. The first classes that we'll have is these ones. W will be full, that is the width. Then let's make sure we are importing this cn from our lib util. So I'll click on these. If you click at the end here, you can just say control space and it will give you the option to auto import. Padding will be 3, margin along the y-axis will be 2, outline is none, rounded will be MD, rounded is like the border radius, disabled will be having an opacity of 70. Then if it's disabled again, we will be having cursor as not allowed, so you can't like click and change the values. And then we'll have a border, we'll be having border as straight hyphen 300, but for dark mode, so dark full colon, we'll be having the border here as straight hyphen 700. After that, we'll be able now to conditionally render these for the errors. Here we have these errors which we brought in our props, and we will be able to read the error for each of the input fields by making use of this ID. And this is how we can do it. We'll be saying errors, which is an array of errors, square brackets, and I'll say ID. And just like this, we are able to access the errors for a specific field. So if we had error for email, we'll be able to show the error for the email. If we had error for the password, we'll be able to show the error for the password. So if we had the error for that specific ID, we'll say end. Let me just hit enter here to come on this line so that you see what I am doing. And now I can say border will be red, rows 400, which is red color. I'll use a comma and I'll add input class names. So these class names would override the existing ones, and that means that we can add more class names or override the existing ones for us to have a custom input field in case we need one. And at the bottom here, I would like to show the error message for the input. Let's get the error message for this input before our return statement. We will be having a const message, which is a variable, to be equal to, and we'll be able to read the error. If we have errors ID and we'll go ahead and get the message as a string. We'll say errors ID, then right here optional dot message as string. We can be able now to show it on our UI like this. If we have the error message, we'll have a span and we'll show that message in here. So I'll say message. We'll have a class name, text is small, and the color is text lows hyphen 400. Another thing that we could have is a label. We are bringing in a label for this input, but we are not showing it anywhere, and we will do it just after our div here. We will first check if we passed a label, because label is optional. We said label is an optional string. We first make sure that it exists by saying label and then end. Here we'll be having the span and we'll show the label in here. We'll be able to have a class name, and now I can say this will be displayed as a block and text will be small. I can save that file. So later on, I'll be showing you how we can make these to be more flexible. But what I would like us to do in the next video is to create the login form by making use of this input field. In this video, we will work on our login form. We'll make use of this form field component, which we created in the last video, and we'll also make use of React Hook form package and Zod to validate our form. And I know if you are not used to TypeScript or React Hook form, some of the syntax might seem hard or weird, but what I would like you to do is to understand what each line of code does. And for the syntax that seems hard, you'll get a hang of it because we'll be creating several forms in this particular application. Like for register here, just understand that what it does is to register our input here into our React Hook form state. So let's just go ahead and start working on our login form. What we need to do is to come to components and we will create a new folder. I'll call it auth, and this is where we'll place all the components that are related to auth. We'll create a new file and we'll say login form.tsx, the trace functional component. then I'll say login form. Here we'll be able to basically return a form, and we'll be making use of some state in this particular component. Therefore, I'll mark this component as a client component by saying use client. Let's say login form. We can hook this login form into our login page. So let's go to app, auth, login, and here we had our page. We'll start by saying container. This is the container component that we created early on in the course. Make sure to import it. Then in here is where I'll have the login form. Make sure to click that to auto import, and I'll self close it like that. And just like that, we have hooked our login form into our login page. And I'll close this. I'll pop the terminal here, and you need to say npm I. We install Zod. This we will use it to validate our form, and then we install this package at hook form stroke resolvers. This will help us to connect our Zod package with our React hook form package so that they are able to work together, and React hook form will be able to use Zod to validate the form. So install those two. Let's start by creating a Zod schema, which we will use in our login form. Come at the root, add a new folder, and say schemas. Inside schemas, I'll create a new file, login schema.ts. And in here, I'll say import an object called Z, and these will come from Zod, the package that we just installed. Then here, I'll be able to export a schema. I'll say export const login schema, and this will be equal to z.object, and we will invoke that method, and in here we'll pass an object, so email, and we'll give its type as z.string.email, and we will make sure to invoke there. Right here we should also call that string like that. So this z.string is the type, then this is the validation part of it. So Zod will know that it should make sure that the email have the email syntax. Like if you try something else, it will throw an error. Now here, I'll have a password. Password will be of type z.string, and I invoke that string. And then here I'll say dot. We can set a minimum for our password, and let's give a minimum of 6. I'll say comma, and here we can give a custom message that will show in case the password is less than 6. Message full colon, then password must be 6 or more characters long, just like that. Then down here, I will create a type from the schema, and I'll say export type login schema type to be equal to z.infer. So we can create a type like this. We use these angle brackets, meaning that it's a generic. And right here, I'll say type of login schema. So we are exporting two things, the login schema and the type that we generate from our login schema. So I'll save that. Let's come back to the login form. Before the return statement, we have a hook that we will be able to receive from our React hook form. I'll say import. Here we will destructure use form from React-hook form. Now let's invoke this use form right here. Use form, and we invoke it, and I can say const. We destructure the values, and we'll say is equals to this use form. One of the value that we will get is the register function. This register function is the one that we will pass to this form field component as register, and it will help us to register an input field like this. Another thing that we'll be able to get is handle submit. This function will help us to submit the form. Then we can get the errors from the form state like this. Form state full colon, then we destructure the errors. For this use form, we will now be able to specify that we are making use of the login schema to validate the form. Use curly brackets, and we'll say resolver, and we'll specify that we are using Zod. So here we'll say Zod resolver. I'll say import Zod resolver, and these will come from at hook form stroke resolvers and then stroke Zod. Then here this should be resolver like that. Then we make use of Zod resolver here. We invoke this Zod resolver and we will pass our login schema. So I'll say login schema. We import that from our login schema here, this one. And I save. Another thing that we should specify is the types. So here after the use form, use these angle brackets, and here you'll be able to say login schema type. So as I told you, the syntax might seem weird or hard, but the more you use it, the more you get a hang of it, and you realize that it's very easy to validate the forms by making use of a React hook form and Zod than by trying to do it manually. Okay, now we'll come to the form here. Let's remove this login form. We'll now be able to make use of our form field component. So this is the component that we created in the last video, and we'll be able to pass to it various props. I'll say ID is an email, and I'll say register, and we'll pass the register from our React hook form, this register here. I'll say errors will be our errors object, this one here that we get from our React hook form. I'll have the placeholder and we'll say it's email. So I think this is good enough for now. And actually, let's go ahead and save that and let's see if it works for now. So what we should do is to run the application, npm run dev, hit enter, go to localhost 3000 on your browser. Then click on login and look, we have an input field. It's too long, so we need to add some styles to our form. Let's come back. Right here at the form, we will be having a class name. We'll say flex. We'll flex hyphen column. Then we'll have a max hyphen width hyphen, and we'll specify here to be 500 px. Then we'll say margin to be auto. This will actually now center our input. And then we'll say margin top to be 8. And we'll have a gap of 2. Here we can add the input field for the password. So I'll duplicate that and I'll say that ID is password. We'll have register as register, errors as errors, and placeholder as password. Our form field component should be able to also accept a type. And now we'll say that the type for this one is password. That will hide the input and just show dots. Here we'll be having a button which we can use to submit the form. Later on we'll make this button to be a reusable button, but for now let's just say button and we'll say login. Then here let's give this button a type. We'll say type of this button is submit. For us to be able to submit this form, we should make use of this handle submit. So here I'll have on submit and we'll say handle submit. Let's come here and I'll create a function called on submit. You could call this function any name, but on submit make more sense. Then this function will be an arrow function which will receive data, and it will be like this. We can console log this data. Right here we'll specify the type of this on submit. We will use submit handler type, and the type will come from React hook form. The data that we will receive here will be of the login schema type. So here I'll specify that type like this, login schema type. So the data should be having an email and a password. Then now this on submit event, when fired, we will be having handle submit, and we will invoke that handle submit and we will pass our on submit. So as you can see, this handle submit from use form hook will be able to make use of this function to submit our data, and we'll be able to get the values that we type in the email field and the password field in this data. So let's see if all these mechanism works. So I will save. I will come back here and look, we have an email and a password. Let's try to submit, and look, the error validation works. By making use of Zod, it already validated the email. It's an invalid email, and you can see this is the exact message that you included in your schema, the Zod schema here. password must be 6 or more characters long, meaning that the connection between our Zod and our React hook form works. Let's say this is the email and the password is just a long random password, and I will be able to check the console here. So console, so I'll click on login, and there we go. We get this console log of data, and now we have an email and our password, and now we will be able to take this data and submit the data to the backend. So I'll see you on the next one. In the last video, we were able to work on our login form. Now in this video, I want us to work on this button so that it's a reusable button and we'll give it our own styling. I'll go to components and common. This is where I'll add a new file, and I'll call this file button.tsx. So let's create a component. Let's call this one button, and simply what we'll be returning here, it's a button. This button will only be used on the client side. So let's say use client. Let's have some types for this button. We will add the type by making use of interface, and I will say button props. We'll be having a label for the button, and it will be a string. Disabled, we'll say it's Boolean. Outlined is Boolean. We'll be having small, we'll make it Boolean. We will be having a class name. This class name will help us to add custom class names in case we have a button that we want to manipulate later on and it doesn't match the current styles that we will include. We will be having an icon, and I'll say the icon is of icon type. This icon type will come from React icons. The icons that we'll be using in our button will be coming from React icons as well. So in our login form, you notice that we gave this type submit, and once we click this, it would automatically call this on submit event to submit the form. But if it was of type button, it will not fire this on submit event. So let's have different types for this button. We'll say the type here could be submit or reset, or it could be just button, or it could be undefined. Now another thing that we'll be able to pass is an onClick function. So we'll give this a type, and we'll say if its event will be of type React.mouse event, then I'll include this generic HTML button element. So that is the type for the event that will be passed with the onClick, and it will be able to return void. So it doesn't return anything, and we'll say that the types for these particular props is button props. And now right here, I'll be able to destructure them. We'll have a label, we'll have the type, we will have the disabled, we'll have outlined, we will have small, icon, class name, type, onClick. All those props that we mentioned here. So I blocked the type twice. Let's remove one of them. Now let's work on this button by making use of these props. The button will receive those props. The type will be type. onClick will be onClick. Disabled will be disabled. Class name here, and we'll be making use of the cn function. We invoke that cn function, and we'll be able to add the styles here. If our button is disabled, we'll give it an opacity of 70. Again, if our button is disabled, we'll have cursor as not allowed. We'll say rounded MD. Once we hover the button, we will set an opacity of 80. We'll have a transition. W will be auto, that's the width. Border will be straight -300. Flex items to be center. Justify center. Let's have a gap of 2. Padding Y of 3. Padding along the x-axis of 5. Border to be 2. So I'll have BG straight 700. Text to be white. For dark mode, we will have border as straight -700. So here I can say margin along the y-axis of 2. Right here at the body of the button, I'll be having a label and I'll also be having an icon. If we have icon and we will say icon like this, and we'll set the size 20. So as you can see, the icon here is small I, but we cannot use small I as a component. So let's rename this small I icon to capital I icon like this. Use full colon and say icon. So that is like just renaming it so that we are able to use it here as a component. Very nice. Now there are some styles that we have not included yet. Let's use a comma, and here I'll say outlined. If we have that, we'll say end, or we will do is to make the background to be transparent, and we'll say text will be straight 700, and for dark mode text will be straight 300, and also for dark mode we should say that BG is transparent as well. And I noticed here for dark mode the border spelling is wrong, and actually, hey, am I messing all the spelling for the border? So make sure the spelling for border is correct. I believe that is the spelling here. Make sure the spelling for border and for other stuff is correct. And now this is for outlined button. Use a comma, you'll have small, and here you'll say end, text to be small, padding along the y-axis to be 1, then border to be hyphen 1 px only. Also let's say px here to be 1. Actually let's say 2. If we have class name, we'll make sure that we include it. Now here is our reusable button. We have the different props, and we used the props here and also here, and we can test it. So let's go to the login form, and instead of this button we will now use our component button. We'll make sure to import it from common button. In this case we'll be using a label for login, so I think we can remove this part actually, and we'll use / there to be a self-closing button, and I'll add a label to be login now. And it's complaining property on click is missing, and what we should do is to make this on click to be optional as well. And I'll save. And for on click we'll use it if our type here is of type button, but for now it's type submit, so it will automatically call on submit there. So I'll go ahead now and save and see how our button looks like. Let's go now here, and this is our button login. We could test the various parts of it like outline. So let's make this to be outlined. I will save, I'll come back, and look, it's now outlined. We could go to this mode or this mode. We could make it to be small. I'll save, and look, it's thinner and smaller. So I think it's good. We'll also be testing the icons when adding the Google and the GitHub buttons, where we will include their specific icons. So for now, I want this to be a big button and I don't want it to be outlined. So I will save that. In the next video, let's create a reusable heading component. In this video, we will work on a reusable heading component. So what we need to do is to go to components, common, add a new file, and I'll say heading.tsx. Hit enter. I'll include an interface and I'll say heading props. This component is a server component because we can make use of a heading in both client and server components. The heading will be having a title and it will be of type string, which is a must. We'll be having center, which will be an optional boolean. We will be having LG for large, an optional boolean. We'll be having MD for mid-sized heading, which will be an optional boolean. I'll come down here, stateless functional component, heading. I'll be able to receive the various props right here. I'll also be adding the types like these, heading props. Right here, I'll be able to receive the title, center, large, and MD. Now I can be able to style the heading. We can wrap it in a div. This div will help us to center the heading. So I can say class name. I'll use these curly brackets and we'll say, do we have center? If we do, then we'll say text hyphen center. If we don't, we'll use a full colon and we'll say text hyphen start. We'll be able to show different heading depending on our props here. If we have large heading, we will show a h1 heading. We will be having the title in here. We'll be adding some styles and we'll have font as bold. Then text will be for Excel and margin along the y-axis will be 2. I will duplicate this. Click on Alt, Shift and the bottom arrow. Right here, if we have MD, we will be showing a H2 heading. We will be decreasing the font size to 3. Then the rest will be the same. Right here, let's also duplicate again. If we don't have MD and if we don't have large, so I'll say LG and end, include some space. If we don't have those two, then we will show a H3 heading, meaning it's a smaller heading, and we will decrease its size as well. And this is how we can create a reusable heading component. Let's make use of it in our login form. Right here before the form field, now we can have our heading. We will include a title. Actually, let's make sure we import. Click here, control space, import it from common heading. Then the title here will be equal to a string. We can say login to web dev.blog. And then here I'll say it's a large heading and we will include it at the center. I will save, go to the browser and confirm that we have a heading like that. It's at the center, it's large. Now in the next video, let's include the buttons at the bottom here for social login, that is GitHub and Google login. In this video, we'll add some buttons for social login, and I want to do that in their own particular component so that we can be able to reuse that component in both this login form and registration form. So I'll minimize everything here. I'll go to components, auth, I'll add a new file and I'll say social auth.tsx. Right here, let's create this component. We'll not be receiving any props here. For now, let's return a div here. Let's add some styles. We will say flex, gap of 2, we will flex column, and MD will be flex row. We'll be having now our button component which we created. So button, make sure it's coming from common button and self close it like that. We'll be having 2 of them. Let's say here the type of this is button, and right here let's give it a label, continue with GitHub. We'll say it's outlined and I'll give it an icon. The icon will be far GitHub, which will be coming from React icons FA. We'll be having an onClick event, and for now we'll do nothing, but later on, once we add our next auth, we'll be able to log in with GitHub. Now that we have added a lot in here, let's duplicate this one. We'll have type button here. It will be now continue with Google. It will be outlined, but the icon now will be far Google. And let's import this, control space, and import it from React icons. So if it doesn't auto import, just type it out. Let's hook this social button in our login form. I'll add a div here and we'll say or. We'll add some styles. I'll say flex, justify center, and margin along the y-axis of 2. Then down here is where I'll say social auth. The reason why we made the buttons for social auth to be of type button is so that when we click those buttons, they will not try to submit this form. You can see the form is still the parent of this social button. And let's save that file and check now how our app looks. So we'll be having this. We log in with email or password, or we continue with GitHub or continue with Google. And you can see our button is reusable. This component is the same one we reused here, but we made it outlined and we added some icons. This is so good. In the next video, what I will want us to do is to create our registration form. In this video, I want us to create our registration form. It will be much easier to create the registration form because it will be so similar to our login form, and we have already seen the entire process of creating our form. Go to components, auth, and add a new file, register form.tsx. I will come to the login form. I will copy everything that we have here and I'll come to register and I'll paste. For now, let's just change this login form, highlight it, use Ctrl D, that will highlight even at the bottom, and we will say now this is a register form component. And let's change the heading, create a webdev.blog account. Let's hook this register form component to our register page. So we will go to app, auth, register page. Then here we'll do a similar thing that we did with our login. We'll include a container component, and in here we will pass our register form component. We'll also make sure that we import this container from our components layout container, and I save. I'll close that. We can now focus on this register form. We will be doing a similar thing, calling useForm hook and getting all these from useForm, but we need to create a register schema and a register schema type. We'll go to schemas, add a new file, and we'll say register schema.ts. We can go to login schema, copy what we have, come to register schema and paste. First of all, we'll fix the name, highlight it, Ctrl D, and let's say register schema. Now we'll be adding a name, z.string. We invoke that. We can have a minimum value for this. Let's have a 4. We can add a custom message. Let's have a max. I don't think there is a name that could be longer than that characters, so I'll set that as the max for the name. Now at the end here, I will include a comma so that that error disappears. I save and it will auto format like this. So we have a name, we will have an email, we'll have a password. After the password, I'll be adding another field for confirm password, and I'll say confirm password. So this is how we will do it. We'll say z.string and we'll invoke that. Before including this semicolon, we will be having something else here. I'll say dot refine and I will invoke that. In this refine, we will return an arrow function, and this arrow function will have values in it. We'll be able to receive the values, and those values are this one: name, email, password, and also confirm password. We can make use of these values right here. So let's perform a return. We'll make sure that values dot password is the same as values dot confirm password. So this refine will help us to make sure that this password and this confirm password are the same before submitting our form. In case we get an error here, we will use a comma, and this is where we will include the message. So I'll say the message here will be password must match, and we will specify that this error message will show for this particular field. So I'll say path is for confirm password. Make sure that the name here is the same as here and same as here. I will save and it will auto format the code, and now this is our register schema. We export it, and also we export register schema type. We will come to the form here and let's use that type here. We will also come here and add the resolver as the register schema. Make sure you import them from the schemas, register schema. Let's also use register schema type here for the submit handler, like that. We no longer need this import, so I will remove it. I'll come down here and you'll notice the login values that we included in our form field is email and password only. But for the schema, it have additional fields. It have the name and it have the confirm password field. And that is why we have an error here. First of all, let's add those fields right here. I'll say ID is name, placeholder will be name. And then let's scroll down. Let's add the confirm password as the last one here. Make sure the spellings are correct here. Placeholder will be confirm password. So now we know the issue is in our form field, because we said this form field only accepts email and password. We could add those values again here, but the problem is that every time we work on a new input field which have a new value, we must remember to come here and add that type. And I want this form field to be very flexible but also type safe. What I will do is that I'll use a different way of doing this. I will remove this interface. I'll be using a type from React hook form called field values. Make sure it's values, not value. And then right here at our form field props, I will create a generic. So this is like a variable for our type, and this variable will extend our field values. So this means that it will be able to accept any value that will pass it, and that value will be extending field values. And now we can use this variable right here. So I'll say t. Now these complaints generic type form field t requires one type arguments. So here at the form field props, include those angle brackets and say t. But now this t is not defined, cannot find t in this particular form field component. So we will need to define it again right here. Just do like this, and right here we'll say t extends field values. It no longer complains. I know the syntax is a bit complicated, but these will make our form field component to be easily reusable across many forms. Right here where we made use of login values, we will make use of t. I told you t is a generic, and that generic is basically like a variable for our types. It will be able to accept a wide range of values, but the values must follow the structure of field values. Okay, so it is still type safe even if it is accepting a wide range of values, instead of just saying any that is not type safe. And for specifying all the types that we'll be using, that will be just a tedious work. So this is a good solution. Just do exactly like I have done, and you'll be able to use this form field in many places, even in your future production application. I save and I come to register form, and look, all the errors are gone. Let's come to this button. It's of type submit, but here we will say register. The rest will remain the same, and here we'll be able to see the data. So let's test our form. I'll save, I'll go here. This is the login form. Let's click on register, and this is our register. Let's inspect here and go to console. Let's first try to just register. Name must be 4 or more characters, invalid email, password must be 6 or more characters, validation works. Let's try to enter some values. Password. Let's try to register without adding confirm password. Password must match. Let's try to add a password that does not match. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The error persists. Let's enter a password that match. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The error is gone. Let's click on register, and we get the values here. We have the password, the email, the name. So we are getting the data, and we can submit the data to register a user. So I'll see you on the next one. I would like you to know that this 3 hours video is part of my FullStack Next.js 15 course, where we create the multi-user blogging platform. The entire course is 18 hours long. It took me a lot of time to prepare and create, and that is why it's also a premium course. It's well structured, and you will get to learn a lot of stuff in this particular course. If you wish to create the multi-user blogging platform with a lot of features, including user profile, editor, follow and unfollow features, live notifications, and so on, please check out my course, and I'll leave a link at the description section below. Go grab it while it's still at an offer. Also, this is my first course on Udemy, so your support will highly be appreciated.